You know what, Cayman? It might be more on fire in the coming weeks, months, and years because news broke today that Microsoft has won the trial against the FTC. A judge ruled in favor of Microsoft. I'm pulling from Taylor Lyles and Wesley Yinpool at IGN. They write as such. The waiting is over, and we have a decision on the recent trial between the Federal Trade Commission, also known as the FTC, and Microsoft. That is what they're known. Judge Jacqueline Scott Corley has ruled in favor of Microsoft, denying the FTC's preliminary injunction request. Quote, Microsoft's acquisition of Activision, that's a nice little slant rhyme, Activision, has been described as the largest in tech history. It deserves scrutiny. That scrutiny has paid off. Microsoft has committed in writing, in public, and in courts to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation for 10 years on parity with Xbox. It made an agreement with Nintendo to bring Call of Duty to Switch, and it entered it entered several agreements to, for the first time, bring Activision's content to several cloud gaming services. This court's responsibility in this case is narrow. It is to decide if, notwithstanding these current circumstances, the merger should be halted, perhaps even terminated, pending resolution of the FTC administrative action. For the reasons explained, the court finds the FTC has not shown a likelihood it will prevail on its claim. This particular vertical merger in this specific industry may substantially lessen competition. To the contrary, the record evidence points to more consumer access to Call of Duty and other Activision content. The motion for a preliminary injunction is therefore, in all caps, denied. End quote. In a statement issued to IGN, FTC spokesperson Douglas Farrar said, quote, we are disappointed in this outcome, given the clear threat this merger poses to open competition in cloud gaming, subscription services, and consoles. In the coming days, we'll be announcing our next step to continue our fight to preserve competition and protect consumers. Douglas, I appreciate it, but you lost, buddy.
Yeah, brother.
It's game over, brother.
Game over, brother.
So, Cayman, there was a lot of legal jargon. There was a lot of slant rhyming.
Legalese that is taking place there.
But ultimately, the United States governing body has decided there is no issue with this. Now, that a little bit later in the article, we can pull in later, Europe still technically could block it on their soil from the CMA. But for all intents and purposes, Microsoft wins. Mm-hmm. Your initial thoughts.
Initial thoughts. As someone who owns an Xbox, someone who owns a PlayStation and owns a Switch, I don't really give a shit, to be completely honest with you, about this merger. A lot of the games that they release, like, I wouldn't play.
Sure.
Anyway,
doesn't move the needle for you.
Yeah, no, and this is not like, oh god, I need to go upgrade my Xbox. Like, no, it doesn't matter. I don't care. I don't care about playing Call of Duty, and truthfully, it is like I think what a lot of this is more of like the mobile game portion of this is I think is what a lot of the FTC was more concerned about. And also they were very concerned about the aspect of cloud gaming and the future of that. And the fact that Microsoft, for the most part, at this point, really has not a monopoly on cloud gaming, but really has a
leg up, though.
Strong headlock on it. Okay. Yeah. And that is concern. That part is concerning. That you are going to eliminate competition from trying to enter the field. Here's the one thing I will say, and this is something we've talked about this with Sony too, with Sony's successes with the PlayStation 4 compared to Xbox, and what's kind of led us to this moment was that is Sony going to become complacent with their lead in the video game sphere in terms of like the big two consoles, and will that complacency lead to just a poor gaming experience? I think you can think of something like DC Marvel, right? Like DC just kept putting out dog shit movies. Marvel just kept putting banger after banger after banger. But now, as we're starting to see, DC still can't make a good movie, but Marvel is now also just like it doesn't matter. We have such a strong hold on this, like on the superhero movie market, that we're just going to keep putting out crap, right? So my thing is, and this is where I think I get a little bit concerned, is like, are we going to get to a point where Microsoft essentially just makes shitty products for all of these things that they've just bought because, why not, right? And there's that. There's also, I think, the other initial thought. I feel like I'm getting a little too far in deep thought now. There will be a retaliation. Like Sony will retaliate.
What do you think that looks like?
I stand by my prediction that by the end of the year, there's a good chance we will hear, if not, we will see it in full force. We will start seeing rumblings that Sony buys Square Enix. And that is not good for anybody.
Sure.
And that's the thing and that's what I think the problem that I had from the get-go was, not that I care that Microsoft has full, and they can say it, and there's historical evidence of companies who've gone and been like, this will not change a thing. Think about Ticketmaster buying Live Nation. They said the exact same thing in writing. In writing, they said the same thing, that this would not affect how concerts work or anything. Everyone hates Ticketmaster now, and there's a reason. It's because they wrote that they weren't going to do something, and then they immediately turned around and did the complete opposite. And guess what? Once the deal is done, there's no legal ramifications against them.
Sure.
And so there is a worry that like that could potentially happen, that all of that you wrote down means jack fuck all. But I think for me, the biggest issue is that Sony will retaliate. There is not a world in which Sony doesn't go out and go, well, if Microsoft can do this, we're going to do it too. And then we start consolidating huge properties to individual consoles. And then that back and forth will continue until it's you have to pick one or the other. And it's going to end up hurting consumers, even though it doesn't seem like this does right now. Like in the long run, this will end up hurting consumers. And I think because of the console war, people don't see that. They just see my side's winning, and that's all that matters.
Sure.
And ultimately, we're all going to end up losing when this all when the dust finally settles. And the truth is, I don't think the dust ever will settle.
Sure.
I think this back and forth is going to continue for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
Until we're all blocked off.
It's funny. So the Square Enix thing, you've been saying that, and it's not that I disagreed. It's just I've always kind of felt that Sony's market value is so much smaller than Microsoft's that like it wouldn't be comparable. But I just did some math because I'm a math boy. Came in.
Mm-hmm.
According to Google, Sony's value as a company is $110 billion. And according to Google, Microsoft's is $2.5 trillion. Granted, Microsoft, I mean, they have Microsoft Windows. Like, it's such a bigger company. Yeah. So at first I'm like, oh yeah, I'm definitely right. But 69 billion, that was the value of Activision Blizzard that they spent, right?
It was seven. No, it was more than, it was like, I remember or maybe 72.
72. So, but close. I'm close. 69
number, yeah.
That is so it's 4.5% of their value is what they spent on Activision Blizzard. Square is 3% of Sony's value. They're $5.3 billion in value. I'm rounding up. It's 2.7%, but it's a lot closer of a kind of a size thing than I thought initially. So I mean, I think the shoe does fit, and I think Square does bring a lot of, I mean, Final Fantasy, obviously, right? I mean, it's already right. I mean, this one is an exclusive. But there's so much more than just Final Fantasy from Square.
And I think the reason that I lean on Square more than something like Capcom, and because Capcom's also another one that like Sony could very well pick up Capcom. I don't think Capcom makes as much sense in my head is like, what does Sony or what does Square Enix, the games they make, where their biggest franchises, where do people play those games? Almost exclusively on Sony's platforms. So it makes more sense for them to pick up something like Square Enix, and the relationship's already there. Whereas it's true, and I think Ryan said this in his deposition, where he said that like, yeah, it made sense for Microsoft to go after the one thing that Xbox is known for, and that's first-person shooters and frat boy games. He didn't say that part, but that's true.
Sure.
right?
sure.
I'm sorry, Call of Duty is a frat boy game. If you're a Call of Duty fan, cool. I have fun. Whatever. Video games are awesome, but go enjoy your Keystone Light, brother.
Yeah,
Um,
it's interesting to me. It's something that I hadn't actually thought of until earlier today. What about, like, because we've been talking for so long about this acquisition, and then I kind of sat down and thought about it. I was like, I don't give a shit about really any Activision Blizzard games. I'm really liking Diablo 4, but like when you think of their major franchises, it's Call of Duty, it's Diablo, it's Warcraft, it's StarCraft, and it's all the mobile shit by way of King. So you got your Candy Crushes, you got your fucking whatever else. None of those really move the needle for me. So then it's like, part of me is like, does this really change much for me? But then bringing in kind of what Europe and what the European Union is kind of concerned about, or not the European Union, the UK actually. So not the European Union, right? The UK Competition Markets Authority, the CMA, their whole thing is, we don't like this because in the next, X number of years, making Call of Duty and all these other companies on like the only real cloud gaming platform right now is going to unfairly kind of paint the market for cloud gaming, which is a piece of the industry that is growing a lot right now. And that is interesting to me because there's, way back before we did this podcast, when Sony spent, I don't remember, but it was over $1 billion on a company called Gaikai. And that it was they're a cloud gaming company. And then we just like never really heard much about that. Like they never really made a splash like Xbox Cloud gaming has. And not to say that they can't still, but Xbox has been so loud about their X Cloud and all that stuff that, yeah, I do wonder if, they say for the next 10 years, Call of Duty will not be exclusive to Xbox. I doubt at the 10-year mark, they're like, all right, it's ours now. I mean, the amount of money that they're going to make in 10 years, it probably would be silly for them to change that. But I do wonder what video games look like in 10 years. I assume there's still going to be an Xbox, a PlayStation, a Nintendo. There might even be an Ouya too. But I hope so. But ultimately, like, I wonder how big cloud gaming will be in 10 years. And if that is the thing, and if Microsoft is that ahead of the curve on cloud gaming, I think that's where the real, I think the CMA is maybe onto something with that, with like what that could end up doing down the line. But I ain't no business guy.
I think and so I definitely think like that with this deal going through, I definitely think I'm going to end up nailing at least one of my predictions this year, which was there will be a certain number of games that will have the Microsoft logo on it when you boot it up on your PlayStation.
Sure.
So we live in this weird world now in which, like, how many Sony games, how many of those games can you play on your Xbox?
There's got to be at least one of them, I would think.
And
but
then
not as many as Xbox.
So, like, how fucking weird would that be if you were to go to a theater, right? You go to your local Regal theater, and you go to watch a Marvel movie, right? You're gonna go watch Avengers 19 or whatever the fuck they're on at this point. And it boots up and it says like an AMC film, and you're like, what the fuck? Like, that's how, like, it's unprecedented. This is like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, at the same time, you also we probably had a overlap at a certain point where there were still Sega games.
Yeah, I was about to say the only thing I can think of is Sega.
That's yeah. So don't get me wrong. We already have some Microsoft games like Minecraft, I think, is one. I don't know if there's really any others right now, but like
there are a few
one,
others, but
Microsoft bought out Mojang, and it's interesting. And if you really look, I guess the thing is, if you look at like big release games, and you start thinking about these like huge games that are also multi-plat, they're done by a big company. It's like Doom, and I mean, shit. What was it? Deathloop had the Microsoft logo on it.
Yeah.
If you look at, you play Minecraft on your PlayStation, guess what? It's going to fucking show you the Microsoft logo on it. And it's, I think that level of like creeping over that, I don't know, just makes me a little bit unsettled to be like, Sony's having to pay Microsoft money to have these games. Like, there's no, like, if you buy it digitally, and then with the idea of like hearing that, like, there's a potential chance that Starfield will not even be a physical release.
Right.
That, like, we start getting into more of this where, like, we're starting to now cut out discs. And what happens if, say, you're playing digital, you're playing Call of Duty, whatever the fuck that game is coming up on that border, right? Now, let's say Microsoft does decide to back out the last minute. And they're like, yeah, you know what? 10 years is up. And guess what? Fuck you. We've outspent Sony. That was their whole plan. When we have documents that show that. And then they're just like, Sony doesn't want to play ball anymore because of it. And they're like, hey, guess what? If you own this game digital, you just own the license. You don't own the game.
Sure.
Get lost. You now lose access because this company doesn't want to play ball with us. And then I'm sitting and I'm like, how the fuck? And the only way I think that you can look at this is if either A, you have like expendable money that you can have all of the consoles and you don't give a shit, or B, you are a certain console pony. And then in that world, you don't care because you're still getting what you want out of it. But like, it just feels wrong to me. Like, could you imagine going to a baseball game? You go to an Atlanta Braves game, and it's like Atlanta Braves brought to you by the Colorado Rockies.
Let's go.
Like, what in the fucking world is this? Doesn't happen anywhere else, but right here, right now, we are experiencing something I don't think there's never been this before.
I wonder though, you've made the point about Xbox games, or rather Microsoft games being available on PlayStation. There have been, like Deathloop launched as a PlayStation exclusive and then eventually went to Xbox, but it was owned by Microsoft the whole time. But I wonder if, as Xbox continues to push cloud gaming, and PlayStation has no choice but to start competing, right? Like with the cloud gaming market, they have the Project Q that's going to be a glorified remote play device. There's already, if you have a PlayStation Premium account, you can stream certain games on there. Like they've not made as much of a splash with streaming as or with cloud gaming as Xbox has. But I wonder if there is a world in which, like on the Steam Deck right now, I can play Xbox Game Pass games. On the ROG, Asus, whatever the fuck, you can play Game Pass games. What if there's a world in which you can also at some point play PlayStation games, stream PlayStation games, if they come out with a cloud competitor? And then now all of a sudden there's this weird nebulous, like, in between console where you can play anything on it, but I mean, maybe not everything, but maybe a Last of Us is still going to be exclusive, like how Starfield is still exclusive. Like maybe there's still going to be that, but I don't know. I wonder if there is a future in which, not that consoles go away by any means, but if there starts to be more cross-pollination between them by way of cloud gaming. I don't know.
So, I see where you're coming from there. I guess my thing is like the gamble that Sony has to make to be able to try to catch up to Microsoft at this point is very different than the gamble that Microsoft had to make to catch up to Sony at this point. Because as we address the price differential between companies, like their evaluations are drastically different.
Drastically different. I mean, that's what, like Sony's like less than 10% the size of Microsoft,
and
or maybe like just around 10%.
What we just did, and I think that's the thing too, is like we essentially just took, like, you have, like, it's almost like if you just look at corporations, like company wise, and you put both up, and I'm not sitting here trying to defend Sony being like Sony's some tiny little small mom and pop shop. It's not. But like if you put them up against, fucking Microsoft, it is like having a mom and pop shop sitting next to a Walmart.
They're 4.4% the size of Microsoft in valuation.
So
that is like a David Goliath situation.
So basically what the FTC just did was they were like, all right, we'll hear this. Okay. And it's Goliath on the stand. And what they do in turn is they look at David and they take away his slingshot. And they're like, no. Goliath has you have an unfair advantage because Goliath doesn't have a slingshot, but you do. And you're like, okay, like that's kind of how it feels, man. Like, and I'm not like, look, and like I've said before, at the end of the day, if it all shakes out, it is what it is. By the time anything probably goes to shit, I'll have arthritis bad enough that I can't play a fucking video game again.
Join the family, baby.
Yeah, man. And so, like, who knows? It probably won't matter in the grand scheme of things to me. But I guess just if I'm looking at this in terms of like, and I think I saw someone say this, and it was like, it's like, looking at this console war, it's like watching two people suck off, these huge corporations on both sides. And it's like, if you really put the numbers together, like, it really isn't like that at all. Like,
Sure.
it is, like, we really, like, Microsoft has the money that if something fails, it's not like the end of the world for them, but like, not that like if Sony fails, like tries to launch something and it fails, like it's not the end of the world, but like if Sony has two bad console cycles that really underperform, like what does that do to Sony?
Sure.
Because like look at Microsoft, they out of all of theirs, they've only had one successful console.
Yeah, on paper, yeah.
And so, but they're fucking trugging along. They're fucking buying out, almost $70 billion worth of a massive company.
Yeah, another something that I'd never thought of until all of these billions of dollars discussions. Activision Blizzard is 63% the size of Sony. So like, that's more than half of Sony's value is what Microsoft bought.
And like, just, okay, so if we just completely remove the names from this equation, and you're talking about like two competitors in a business ecosphere that are vying for certain properties, and you're like, hey, this is what we're setting up, is this right here, and this company's going to buy this company, and you're going to try to defend this huge company that this is okay. Like, I don't think if you remove the names from the equation, I don't think you can make a valid argument.
Yeah, it's tough. Nick in the
Speaking
chat,
of fucking tough, man, got a fucking, you can't see it, Ticketmaster email.
Oof.
Fucking blows my fucking balls.
Nick says, you guys know me. I want my physical box. I want to read the small paragraph on the back of the box. I want friends to come over and see my collection. I don't want to turn on my console so that people can see my collection. I know everything will go digital. It feels that way, but that is just going to push away gamers like me. And now I'm reading this one live on the show. I haven't actually read this one already. Based on what you guys are saying, plus the court statement, sounds like this is a monopoly, but the court just said, well, that's 10 years away and they will do cloud. Yeah, I don't know. It's I think there is still a lot of, we're kind of speaking objectively in a lot of ways. I do think there is still something to be said about Microsoft, even though as a company, they are so much bigger in terms of what they have earned as Xbox. And I don't know the value of Xbox, but when you consider like a lot of this, like they've been in all of these different court hearings talking about how they're in third by a mile between them, Nintendo, and PlayStation, and that's true. So like there is part of it is like, it's like, to bring the David and Goliath analogy back, it's like there is Goliath, but I guess technically what we're talking about is like his arm in a way, like because Microsoft is so much bigger than what Xbox is. So that is where it also just makes all of it like kind of hard to really pin down in a way.
Yeah, I guess my one issue with that statement, Patrick, if you would oblige.
I would love to oblige. I would love to do a lot.
Is that if we say, well, if you look at how small Xbox is in comparison to Microsoft, then Xbox still just spent 66% of their competition's worth on not like some huge thing, or I mean, it's a huge thing, but not like some like I don't know how to explain it, but basically like we're saying that like
it's like Bowser Jr. is using Bowser's like
money
to buy
to fucking enter into the human trafficking ring to pick up Daisy and Peach. Yeah, I'm just saying.
I think we cracked it.
Yeah, it's final thoughts on this, Patrick. I don't think we'll see full ramifications of like this deal for a while. Like it'll
Yeah.
be several years before I think we really start to see the full blown ramifications of like what this means. Um, I guess for me at the end of the day, like this isn't a win for anyone. And I'm tired of people trying to act like it is or that this is a consumer's first thing. Like we're still ignoring the fact that Microsoft very much in their documented emails is not consumer first. Microsoft also just raised the price of Game Pass. So like they are starting to do and we get to a point, right? And I think people will start to see it won't be immediate. It'll be down the line. It'll probably be 5 to 7 years where we will start to finally see like the actual impact of this. I don't like the argument that Xbox is just trying to catch up with Sony. Like Xbox during the 360 days was fucking crushing Sony.
Sure.
And
But
sure,
like
there was
a lot.
the red ring of death, but like honestly, who fucking cares? They were still selling a second console or a third console in some
Yeah.
instances. So
Yeah.
they weren't doing bad, you know. It didn't ruin their reputation. They had a bad console cycle with the Xbox One. And yeah, they got far behind, but that was their own fault by not being able to like put their talent where it needed to be. And um I will say this, like like I said before, I'm worried about the ramifications of like what Sony does to hit back. Because I think that's going to be the first, like this is the first blow, but it's always the second punch that gets caught, right? That's what my dad always told me. It was like, if you're in a fight with a kid at school, don't hit back because the first punch no one ever sees is the second punch that everyone does. And that second punch will be Sony. And that second punch is when everyone's going to get really upset about this. And the truth is, it will be a full blown retaliation move. It will not be consumer friendly.
Sure.
Not that this really was either. And then we're just going to have to deal with this as our new life now. The precedent's been set. You can't stop it.
Yeah, I won't be surprised if over the next several months, because we probably won't really see much, even though like when they bought Bethesda 2 or 3 days later, they dropped like half of their catalog on Game Pass. I don't think we're going to see that for Activision Blizzard so quickly. They've been very loud recently that Diablo 4 is not going to be on Game Pass. I think eventually it will. And I think I'm pretty sure Call of Duty is going to end up being on Game Pass. They're not going to make it. Yeah, they're not going to make it. I don't know if this year's will. I mean, it probably will, but
100%.
But they're so like in a way, having Game Pass will only be more valuable because there's going to be more games on it. There's going to be more games from different companies on it, big companies that, you know, if you're a Call of Duty player and you already have an Xbox, you're now saving $70 a year. Yeah. You're not going to have to buy that every year anymore. So there will be, I think, at a glance, things that seem pro-consumer for sure. I wonder, and this, you know, in a way isn't necessarily relevant to the podcast, but like, I wonder what this precedent sets outside of gaming for other big tech acquisitions. Like in the TV space, in the film space, like Warner Brothers has already been doing a bunch of shady shit. Like, is that's my, and like to go back to Nick's comment earlier about the chat, like we've been seeing for the last 6-7 months, the shit that's just been disappearing off of streaming. Shows like Arrested Development, where like certain seasons never had a physical release. So like those kinds of things where like, yeah, that's what I'm more concerned about personally than the gaming stuff. But we're gonna see. I mean, this, as we kind of alluded to at the beginning of this story, it is technically the FTC lost in America, but I'm sure this story is still gonna have legs for a bit. Like we'll be back around the block with this story in some capacity, I'm sure. But we're just gonna have to wait and see.